Can you guys hear me? This is Brian.
You're like to say, who saw me?
Yeah.
I have to be right alongside of my pickup, so I can get a hold of my pickup on one side. All around it, and get out. Oh, anyway. That happens so fast.
Oh, it does.
Okay.
You know, sometimes you slip and you fall around, and maybe you could salvage it. There was no salvage.
You don't have anything, you don't have anything. It's an easy answer.
It's like when I go skiing, my goal is, don't go down. That's my, cause I can't always get back up. I gotta keep my skis off to get back up sometimes. Oh.
Nothing to worry about.
Yeah, nothing to worry about. It's like.
Please.
Please. A whole lot better than Mark.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
We're
what
talking-
I can imagine what was behind
5
it.
years.
I have no idea.
You don't know what they're looking for.
I haven't fallen since the last time I went, obviously.
I could go, I don't go down once. in a while. My son's skied up, so I grab my pole down and we're gonna pull me up with like a. Anyway.
I'm the one that did it. Thank you. Interest today and tomorrow in the topic.
Oh, this is.
Yeah, I'm afraid I told them. Yeah, sure. Had to do it.
If you have to walk in one, just water it.
Yes.
Spongy.
Oh, oh, you did, yeah.
I could.
Yeah, keep going.
We'll start with the work I got to.
Good to meet you.
Thank you.
You get people on canal managers, irrigation district managers, waiting for that info to help guide.
Oh, not pretty
How they're
well.
gonna open, when they're gonna open the gates for the year. Our recharge, yeah, probably for another.
Come back next year.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Canals are gonna open the gates. Because it takes them a couple weeks to fill the canal. So, some of those canals are 200 miles long.
Well,
That's true.
Hey, you never get back.
It's also got like 202 miles of canal.
Sometimes.
The north side's got like 170 miles.
Oh, is that right? From where? Alberta?
they ain't dry all winter there. Well, unless they're repairing rates for.
Yeah, so Milner Gooding won't have to do that to fill it, because they just fit.
You have a good program.
Yeah.
Somewhat. Yeah, we have a request to the front. How does Mike Morrison say?
This is kind of scary.
Okay, is Al online?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, all right. We're gonna call to order Water Board Meeting 5-25 work session. Originating at the conference, Water Center here in Boise. We have two board members who are online today. Appreciate them taking time out of their otherwise busy schedule to be with us today. First item of business is roll call. Jennifer.
Mr. Barker,
I'm present.
Ms. Cole-Hansen. Here. Mr. Gibbs,
Here.
Mr. McMahon,
Here.
Mr. Olmstead,
Here.
Mr. Stevenson,
Here.
Mr. Vanstone,
Here.
and Chairman Raybould.
Here. Okay, thank you. We have a request to rearrange today's agenda. Do we need a motion to do that?
Yeah, we probably do.
I'd entertain a motion that we move agenda items 6 and 7 from their present location on the agenda to become agenda item 2 and 3, and then renumber the rest, I suppose.
Mr. Chairman, I so move.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to Dworshak Small Hydro Power Facility. Welcome, Mike.
Well, thank you for having me, Chairman Raybould.
Always glad to have you here. Just when you thought you were running out of things to do, we found something else for you.
Oh, I appreciate that,
Yeah.
sir. Yeah, I appreciate you accommodating my schedule. Actually, on the second issue of the Mountain Home Project, they called up and wanted to have a meeting with me. So that meeting, about the only time we can arrange it is about the time I was supposed to be speaking. So I appreciate you accommodating my schedule.
We'll try and let you take care of business and get you on your way.
Okay, well, I'm going to be giving you looks like I'm going to be giving you two presentations today. One is going to be about the Rorschach Small Hydro Project. And in particular, we had a spill up there a couple of weeks ago and want to give you an update on that. And then we're just going to give you a quick progress report on the Mountain Home Air Force Base project. So let's see. Okay, so for those of you who may not be familiar with the project, I know a lot of you are very familiar with it. I think there was a visit up there a couple of years ago, so I know quite a few of you are familiar with it. But if you're not familiar with it, I'd like to give you a quick overview of the project and then talk about the spill that we had. So this, the Rorschach Small Hydro Project was constructed and owned by the board. They completed it in the year 2000. It's located at the North Fork of the Clearwater River. It's about 4 miles from Orofino. It's about a mile downstream from the big Rorschach Dam. So this isn't actually at the dam site. It's kind of separate, and I'll show you how that works in a minute. This is a collaborative effort with the Clearwater Fish Hatchery. So we have to always take into account the fish hatchery. We're actually using their water, the water that they have for their fish hatchery. We're kind of intercepting it, generating hydropower out of it, and then passing it back onto the fish hatchery. There's 2 generators up there with a total nameplate capacity of about 3 megawatts. This generator you're looking at here in the background on my slide is the larger of the 2. It's about 2.5 megawatts, and it's the one that actually is the problem child. So we've on average the last few years, we've been generating about 17.5 gigawatt hours over the last 5 years. That's decreased a little bit. Earlier, we were generating a little more than that. I'd like to talk about that at the end of my presentation. We have a power purchase agreement with BPA, and we have a wheeling agreement with Clearwater Power to get the power to BPA.
Chairman, Mike, do you know what the rate that they paid for the kilowatts?
Yes, sir. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but this is as good a time as any. We're getting paid a little less than 8.3 cents per kilowatt hour.
That's not too bad.
No, it's really good.
Yeah.
And we have, it's really good. Part of that is that built in at the time that we made our agreement with them, rates were kind of high. And then we've got a 3% per year adder that's built into our contract. So every year it just goes up 3%. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that our contract comes up for renegotiation in 2030, June of 2030. We're going to have to renegotiate it. And I'm not too sanguine that we're going to be getting that good a rate again. So that's something that we are definitely going to have to provide information for. That was a very timely question. Jennifer, what is this darn thing markers? Okay.
No, there's so many things at once.
Oh,
Maybe it just.
I used that.
Yeah, just.
Okay, that's what I'll do instead. Okay. So it was originally $5.5 million for the whole project cost. That's 1999 is when it was funded. It was funded with $5 million in revenue bonds that the board issued. Bonds were paid off in 2019. So since 2019, everything that we get either is something that the board can use for other projects or it goes to operating expenses. Average revenue has been about $1.3 million over the last 5 years. Pretty good. But the operating costs have been increasing to an average of about $315,000 a year. Prior to 5 years ago, they were typically around $120,000 a year. So operating costs have increased, and that's largely because we've got an increase in unscheduled maintenance events that have come up. So we've had an increase in unscheduled maintenance events. What that's done is it's taken down our ability to generate. So we're generating less power, hence less revenue. And we're paying more on maintenance. Like I said, I'd just like to touch on that a little bit at the end of the presentation. Okay, and again, our power purchase agreement terminates June 29th, 2030. Got to renegotiate it. Okay, fish hatchery. I had mentioned earlier that Clearwater Fish Hatchery is a partner. This actually also will affect or impact the Dvorak National Fish Hatchery, which is downstream from it. So we kind of consider them both to be partners, although Clearwater Fish Hatchery is clearly a big partner. The power plant is actually built atop their water distribution structure. Water comes on into the distribution structure, it's mixed, and it's then sent out to the fish hatchery. We've actually constructed this on top of it. So anything that we do can affect them. So this provides all of the water that's used by Clearwater Fish Hatchery. It provides domestic drinking water to the Dvorak National Fish Hatchery, but it can be used to provide quite a bit of additional water to the National Fish Hatchery as well. So we've got a lot of stakeholders in the health of this plant and how we're doing. Yeah, wrong way. Okay, so maintaining this constant flow of water to the hatchery is absolutely paramount. I was told that in as little as 4 minutes, we can start killing fish down there if we run out of water. In other words, they need a constant flow of running water. They can't just have the water sit there stagnant while the fish wander around. So, anyway, so the fish hatchery, that's the Clearwater Fish Hatchery, needs to be able to quickly respond to any emergency. So they do have the ability to control our water flow. That is one of 4 valves that are in the plant via which they can control our water flow. They can either do it manually with that crank, or in the back is that box, and that box is actually automated and they can control the flow from the fish hatchery. So what they can do is they can just shut down water into our generator and divert it directly into the diversion structure below. So, and okay, there's also a couple of pen stocks. You can see the pipe kind of coming across the dam and on down. That there's actually 2 pipes there. One's big, one's little. The larger of the 2 pipes, called the penstock, actually sits high up in the reservoir. It's actually on a floating kind of a thing. So it sits high up in the reservoir, and it gets relatively warm water from the reservoir to go into the distribution structure. The smaller of the 2 pipes is kind of permanently mounted a couple 100 feet below that. So the water is always quite cool. And so they can get cool water out of that. So they can adjust the relative amounts of water that they get into the fish hatchery and change the temperature to get an environment fish like. Okay, this is just a picture on the left is a photograph of the inside of the gallery where our 2 pen stocks are. You can see them. Goes from the front of the dam all the way to what you see on the right, which is, or I'm sorry, from the back of the dam where the water is, all the way to what you can see on the right. We've got some monitoring equipment up there. We've got some telemetry equipment up there that we go up periodically and maintain it. So anyway, very nice scenic view from up there on the dam. Okay, so now let me talk about the spill. Okay, February 26th, got one of those phone calls you don't want to get. So we were just notified that the generator experienced a low fluid alarm. And then within minutes, fish hatchery staff at both fisheries were noticing water coming into the structure. Well, for the Clearwater Fish Hatchery, that means that the water was coming straight, or that the oil that they were getting, I said water, I mean oil, was coming straight into the distribution structure and then going to them. For the National Fish Hatchery, that's the Dvorak Fish Hatchery, what that means is that the water was getting into the river Okay, we have an overflow, so any water that the Clearwater Fish Hatchery doesn't need can overflow into the river. So that means that water was going to, or that oil was going to both places. So they had already shut down the generator. We got our operator up there, that's Thompson. They got up there within an hour or so. They're actually out of Lewiston. They got up there and started taking taking spills to control, or taking actions to control the spill. So by the time I got up there that night, everything was pretty well buttoned up. I mean, the spill was contained. There weren't really any other issues going on there, except the fact we've got a generator that doesn't work now. Total of about 43 gallons leaked from the primary generator unit. We cleaned it all up and actually weighed the spill pillows we used to clean it up with in order to estimate how much actually got into the river and into the distribution structure. It's 4.6 gallons or less is the total amount that got into the river. And this is the back end of that generator. You can see on the left, you can see that steady leak coming out. And on the right, they've already taken this apart. You can see all the oil on the ground there. It's all over the place in the generating room. On the right, you can see that they've taken off the back end of the generator. It turns out that a lot of that oil got kicked up into the rotor and the stator. So we've had to take that actually, we've got a group on site yesterday and today. They're disassembling that, cleaning that. You can't have all that oil in electrical contacts. Cleaning that and putting it back together right now. Okay. So plan is down pending implementation of improved spill control measures. I'll get to that in a sec. Leak occurred in the primary generator's primary journal bearing housing. Concrete floor was constructed so that it could act as the spill prevention. So anything that was spilled on the floor is supposed to drain into a couple of sumps that are there. But if you look at it, the concrete floor doesn't look as even as it should be, and the slope doesn't quite look right. And you can see what's actually happened is some of that oil has come on around and gone through floor penetrations that actually have utilities going through that. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. So remember, we're right on top of the fish hatchery structure. It's just leaked right down through those. I do not know whether when it was constructed, those weren't sealed, or if that's something that's happened in maintenance over the last 25 years, but clearly that has to be fixed. So we're going to fix that before we bring this online. And I've talked to our partners up there about that. They're all game for that. They would also like to see us come up with a little bit better spill control plan than just using the floor. That's something we agreed to take a look at. So, okay. Let's see, I was expecting to be able to use this little pointer here. Does the pointer work, Jennifer?
Yes, but it only works on the front screen.
Okay. There we go. Okay, you can see oil, this up here is where the oil leak occurred, where those buckets were in the previous picture. You can see a lot of oil down there. And there's a couple of sumps that it's supposed to go into. But some of it didn't go into the sumps. It came on around, and you can see the little floor penetrations there and there and there. And they're all over the place in there. And some of those are apparently where it leaked through. So it's a matter of going through and making sure that those are sealed. The question of why the floor isn't sloped in a way that it all goes straight to the drains is something that we're going to have to look at. Don't know, that would be a difficult thing to fix. Okay, impact to our partners. The fish are okay. No harm to fish. The Clearwater people and the Dvorak people were on it literally within minutes. They went out and they put spill control measures in place. You can see at the bottom of the page here, or the bottom of the screen, that is what they call a pig boom. And they put a bunch of those up, and you can see it's doing its job. It's picking up that oil, so the oil floats, so it's not getting into the fish hatchery. That's a good thing. They have asked us, this is actually Dvorak Fish Hatchery has asked us to reimburse them for the cost of the pig booms that they used and some other spill prevention. So far, those costs have been under $2,000. Things have gone very smoothly between us and them. one of the fish hatcheries said, well, it's good to have an exercise, real world exercise once in a while. But anyway, so the cost to us, to our partners, have been relatively small. The one thing that I feel really badly about is that Clearwater, and I set up here Clearwater Fish Hatchery, it's actually the Rorschach Fish Hatchery, an error on my part, had to issue a no drink order. And there's 4 households on their site. So they had to go a day without being able to use the water there. So that was an inconvenience to them.
Mike, just to clarify, they're able to use the water now.
Yes.
So do they filter that water or are they just drinking it
No, it
right out of
comes-
the reservoir? What?
Mr. Raybould, it comes directly out of the diversion structure. And they do have some kind of a very, very loose primary treatment, but their people put in place a don't drink order. I don't know what their system looks like. I don't know if it's got a like an inverted T baffle set or anything like that. And I assume it does, but he just told me that he'd issued that order. And we did some testing, set it up for a lab, and found that by the time we had taken our samples, there was absolutely nothing left in the water. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so as long as I've got you here, I'd like to talk a little bit about, kind of longer term next steps. And we don't have these fully formulated. It's a surprise, but you can see that's production, power production at the plant. And you can see right here, somewhere around 2014, it's been decreasing. Blake Burkhardt is actually, he and I have been working on this. We kind of disagree over where exactly this decrease started, but you can see it's been going down. Most of that decrease in production is due to longer and more frequent unplanned, unscheduled maintenance events like this. Most of them haven't spilled hydraulic fluid into the river. So the plant's going to need a checkup, and we're going to be back here talking to you about how we can do that checkup. It's currently 25 years old. That's half of its 50-year design life. Generally been well maintained, but as you can see that there's some things that it's got some little warts and bumps that have come up over the time. Some of the materials are aging. Some of the stuff is downright obsolete. These right here are controllers. They were state of the art back in the year 2000. At present, you can't even find them. You have to find another plant that's been taken apart so you can get them used. And there's very few people left in the world anymore who even know how to program these. So even though this part of the system isn't broken, when it does break, we're going to have to go through and overhaul all of the electrical controls for the system. So as an example of something that we're going to want to do over the next year is at least do a study to find out what it's going to take to convert this to a newer set of controls, something that we can buy and that will last us the next 25 years. And that's actually a picture of what the plant looks like when there's not oil on the ground. That's what it's supposed to look like. I told you there were 2 power plants in there. The other one is underneath the mezzanine that this picture is taken from. It looks like this, but it's smaller. It looks like a mini-me version of it. So I stand for any questions you might have about this.
Okay, board members, Pat.
Mr. Chairman, Mike, is it food grade oil that's leaking?
Mr. Raybould, Mr. McMahon, no, it's not. Okay, the oil that's in there is called Chevron AW32, Chevron Clarity. It's a product that's supposed to be environmentally safe and friendly. Obviously, it's a petroleum-based product, and people are, ask a lot of questions about that. But what actually leaked was that Chevron AW32. We can probably convert the plant to a seed oil. We've just been discussing that. That would have probably.
Well, do fish like that any better than the petroleum-based product?
Oil, I think they fry better.
They fry better?
It's human consumption.
Yeah, Mr. Raybould, the idea behind it is that it's an organic, it's the same kind of thing as a vegetable oil. If it spills in the water, the kind of thing you'd find there anyway, so.
Okay, Joanne,
Mr. Chair, you said in one of the slides that it was the primary generators bearing housing that broke or leaked.
Mr. Raybould, Ms. Cole-Hansen, yes, it occurred in the bearing housing. The hydraulic fluid comes into the bearing housing under pressure. This is the same kind of bearing you've got in your automobile around the crankshaft. Okay, it comes on in under pressure, so it's an oil pump of sorts. In fact, the actual location of the oil pumps, you've got an oil pump right there, and that's its spare right there in case it happens, the first one. Anyway, goes into that bearing housing, and then it's supposed to, as it does in an automobile, it's supposed to drip down into this crankshaft. For whatever reason, it started filling up. And the reason it's filling up, we went through and we took a look at while I was up there, we took a look at all kinds of lines. There's a bunch of lines under here that connect that bearing housing to this little tank, which is where the spare oil is stored. All the return looked fine. I mean, we took all the pipes off and looked through them, everything looked fine. We even dissected one just to make sure, but they're pretty big. It's gravity feed. So it's a little bit of a mystery why it's going down there. We have one theory right now that it may be foaming, but while it all of a sudden decided to start foaming today when that oil's been in that tank for a couple of years, we don't know yet. So.
But there's a regular, Mr. Chair.
go ahead, yeah.
I have another question. There's a regular maintenance inspection of this housing that.
Yes, ma'am. It was actually last inspected in November. And we inspected it. At that time, we do oil soap samples. We take the oil and send it to a lab to see if you can find any degradation to the oil. It came back very clean bill of health on it.
Okay, other,
Mr. Chairman,
Dale,
Mike, the generator is offline now. So any idea when it'll be back online?
Yeah, Mr. Raybould, Mr. Van Stone, it's still down now. We're cleaning the stator on the rotor today. We're going to be putting it back up very slowly, and we're going to start doing some testing on it with people at the site. We've directed that no work be done without people at the site who can turn the system off. So they're going to be testing it. They're going to be looking to see if they've still got some more diagnosis. I've said it's a leak, which is true, but the leak is occurring because it's backing up somewhere else. And it's somewhere deep in the guts of this thing. We don't know where. The second thing is we promised our partners, and it's something we should do, even if we didn't promise our partners, that things like these floor drains, we're going to go out there and make sure those are fixed. But those two things have to be done before we can light the plant up and go back into production. Once it's in production, we're going to try to come up with a more comprehensive spill prevention and control plan.
Yes. Thank you.
okay, that answered, okay. All right, and maybe you have to get a kid's wading pool or something and put in that area as a catch basin. Yeah, and I think it's important to know it's equipment. It's 25 years old. Equipment does these kind of things. I give my compliments to both the people operating the hatchery and our on site or on our operators for getting it taken care of quickly. And then we didn't have a problem. We didn't have a fish kill. I think you're telling us a very positive story here. And we probably need to review what needs to be done in the way of maybe a deeper maintenance cycle to get the project up to date. I think we have a reserve account, don't we, that's available to pay for repairs and upgrades to the facility. So we ought to have a comprehensive look at what we need to do to make that thing run as well as it can.
Agreed, and we're working on that right now, Mr. Raybould.
Okay, and then Al or Brian, did you have any questions or comments?
Nothing for me, Brian. Yeah, as chairman, I attend regular power plant meetings for Lucky Peak and Arrow Rock, and I think two things about this that are concerning. One is that we've been down for a month, so we've lost $100,000 worth of revenue, I guess, if it's $1 million a year. And it seems like a long time to take to fix this problem. And so we need to have somebody that can, when we have these issues, somebody that can take care of this in a expeditious manner, because we don't have the people that can do it, but we have to have somebody available that can get there and get things fixed quickly. And it seems like, I don't know any of the details, but it seems like a month is a long time for us to not have this thing back up and running. The other thing is, what we do at these power plants is we have a regular schedule for when things need to be upgraded. Lucky Peak it's about the same age. They just did a complete overhaul of all of their governor equipment and all of their electrical controls, and they got brand new stuff in there so that they will have these things. While the plant itself may be 50 years or 100 years, the electrical equipment and the controls equipment are all things that have to be updated on a very regular basis, because as Mike said, there's no spare parts. There's people that don't know. Nobody knows how to repair them when they break down. And so we need to have a comprehensive plan for what we're going to do with all of the controls systems in place, and what kind of warning signals we need to have if in the event something like this goes wrong again.
Point well taken. Anything else, board members? Okay, thank you for the update, and thank you for rushing up there and coming to the rescue once again. I think the next item we have on the agenda is Mountain Home Air Force Base Water Resilience Project update, and that's Mike also.
As long as I'm here.
Yeah. Mike, just a thought. It looks to me like we ought to tighten up the bandwidth on that oil tank reservoir for when the low limit triggers. 40 gallons seems to me to be like quite a bit of oil that went someplace before the system realized it was gone.
Mr. Raybould, that isn't lost on us. There's a number of other things that Blake and I took this over about a year ago, and we are frequently surprised by what we run into. It's always a new and exciting new challenge, keeping that plant running.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, this one here is much better news. So we didn't leak anything, I know that several of you have been up for different tours that we've had over the last year. Probably remember going down to the actual place where the pump station would be. Well, we have a pump station there now. So construction is still on schedule. We have not gotten any change orders in about a year. It's still under budget. Pipeline and pen stock are complete. So the pipeline is done. Pump house building is complete, but we're currently installing control equipment in the pump house, and then going out to the reservoir out here, we're putting in some pipes that are going to act as the inlet. We've got divers out there. I got a couple of pictures about. Okay, so let's see. Air Force has submitted a gift package for congressional notification and review. The process will be complete on April 14th. As I indicated earlier, there's been something going on with that, and I've got to meet with them to discuss what may have happened there. But I don't think it's big. I think it's big. Staff in the Air Force are including a water rights agreement. I understand that is, I keep hearing it's almost ready to be done, but it's still almost ready to be done. Timeline, and you've seen this a zillion times before. July 1st is the one to remember. It's when we hand it off to the Air Force, and we're still on track to do that. Okay, this is inside of that building that I showed you a picture of. They have put all of the equipment, the big pieces of equipment in. There's going to be partitions in that building, so the electrical control panels on the right are going to have their own little room around them, but it's a lot easier to go through and install the big equipment and then put the partitions in second. So that's what they're doing. So that's the inside of that, and that's actually about a week and a half old. So since then, I haven't been out there since then. So, but my bet is that it looks a lot different by now. But there's a lot more done. This right here, they're getting ready to put the pipelines out to the middle of the lake. So they've got, you can see over there in both of the pictures, you can see the kind of bubbling action in the water. That's actually a diver who's down there, who's assisting with us. So that was the best picture of a diver we can get. And the Air Force owes us a couple of water tanks. They agreed when we started this process to handle the many millions of gallons that we're going to need to test it, to and to clean it out. I mean, there's dirt and stuff in it. So they're providing the tanks. They wound up having to go kind of off schedule for them. So the tanks are going to be done according to the Air Force by the time we get by the time we're ready to use them. We have actually already done a lot of pressure testing on it. We've filled the pipe up with water. So it's completely full of water right now. And they go through and they take each one of the segments and they open them up and pressurize that one segment, check to see if they're getting any leaking. But there's nothing like checking the whole thing at once. And any questions?
Board members, any questions for Mike?
Mr. Chair,
Joanne?
this is just for my own curiosity. Are those storage tanks concrete or are they steel?
They're steel. Yeah. They're on a concrete pad. And let me go back. You can go back. Yeah. You can see the one on the right. See that hoop at the top? That's going to be the lid. This frame is kind of in the middle of it, but the tank is going up around it. This one here isn't as high. They've got, these are, I think, 4x8 or 4x12 pieces of steel that you put on and wrap around this thing. So this one here is almost done. That one there is a little behind it.
Okay,
Chairman,
Pat and then Dale.
Also, a question of curiosity, what are you testing? The PSI are you testing the pipe at?
Every section gets a different pressure. Typically, everything gets tested to no less than 50% of its operating surge pressure, which is operating pressure plus whatever you get for water. Thank you.
Okay, Dale?
Mike, maybe I missed this, but was they already power at the site where the pump is? Or you had to bring power in?
We got yes and no. The Idaho Power put in the line extension last week and a half, 2 weeks ago. No, it was a week and a half ago. They put in the line extension, but it's not completely facilitated. They are able to use some power from that line for their construction activity, but we still don't have enough to run the pumps.
So there's more work to be done on the power.
And that's being done concurrently with all the other work that's happening.
Okay, Dean?
Sure. Mike, did they have any leaks when they tested the pipe?
We thought we had a leak in one line and we went back and remember it's kind of captive. We're trying to do this with water in the other sections of the pipe. Originally, they thought they might we went back and took a look at the data. This is PVC pipe. It can expand and contract a little bit. I think what we were looking at was actually the contraction of the pipe, just slightly.
Sounds good. Al, Brian, O, you guys have anything?
Nothing.
Okay. All right. Well, we need to probably send you on your way to the good news side of your story today. So
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Pleasure meeting with you again as usual.
Okay.
See
All
you
right.
soon.
Okay, Mr. Patton, now we're to rental pool procedures.
Correct.
And Mary's gonna come and explain the nuances of the findings of the local advisory committees with regard to rental pool procedures.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome, Mary. Glad to have you here today.
I just need to find my materials. I apologize.
No, that's okay. We've kind of got everybody out of sequence a little bit here this morning. Everything gets shuffled into the deck and then we'll accommodate you.
That's okay. I told Mike I'd take care of him later for jumping ahead.
Yeah.
So this morning, I just have rental pool procedures to introduce to you for some changes. The first one is in the Upper Snake rental pool. These procedures were adopted by their advisory committee on March 4th. And then I also have the pay at River Basin rental pool procedures, which were updated and adopted by their advisory committee on March 11th. I'll be introducing a resolution for the board to adopt these new procedures with the director's recommendation tomorrow. For an overview of the changes to the rental pools, we'll just start with the Upper Snake. This is a draft. This is the memo that I provided to the director with a summary of these changes. If any of these you would like to look at the red line version, we can definitely jump to those pages. The first change was new lands purposes. There was additional language that specifically allows for an exemption to the moratorium for new rentals if the recharge was approved previously. We also have a change in the common pool for small rentals, which increases the 100 acre-foot limitation of small rentals to 200 acre-feet for renters with a service area that appoints a diversion greater than 10,000 acre-feet. Rental prices in the common pool were increased. It removed a tiered pricing and is now a flat fee regardless of system fill. And that price is $29 an acre foot, except for flow og by BOR, which is still at $23 an acre foot. The next is storage system fill in the assignment pool. And this is language which was previously under the common. It's now under the assignment pool, and it's for that tiered pricing for when a system is considered full. Fees and surcharges in private leases. There was an increase to the water district administrative fee from $1.30 to $2.30 an acre foot. Payment to consigners in the extraordinary circumstances pool. So this helps them with their timing for payments. It addresses, it adds that payment to the owner, the storage holders will be contingent upon payment from BOR for flow og. And then there were a couple of changes in their application forms and agreements. So Water District 1 or Water Master was added in some of these forms. And then any changes that needed to be addressed in forms consistent with the changes in the procedures were also added. Were there any items that were listed in here that you would like to see in the red line?
Board members, is there any additional information you need to have to deliberate on whether we approve these tomorrow or not? Questions? Brian or Al? I'm good. Just to note the
Nothing.
change. Al?
No, I was just saying there was
Oh.
nothing. It took me a little while
Okay.
to find the unmute button.
Okay, that's fine. The fee that O1 is charging is in relationship. They figured out how much staff time they were spending. And they needed to make that adjustment to compensate for all the staff time that it takes to do the private leases.
Mhm.
And so that's why that change was made. That's not a get-rich-quick scheme on the part of Water District 01. It's just to cover their costs, as I understand it.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that's what I understood as well. I know that even for the board's bank, private agreements take a little longer.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, I think with that, we could probably move on to the other set of procedures.
This is gonna be for the pay-at, apologize, let me just get back up to this summary. So this is our summary that I also provided to the director to get his recommendation for approval. But there were just a couple of really short, quick changes for the pay-at rental pool. The first was on private leases. They wanted to address a deadline that they added. And then that also included adding the deadline to the application form and then adding a signature space for the water master upon approval of that private lease. And then their final form for assignment of storage to the common pool changed the year from a set date of 24 to a fillable date so that the assigner can put in the year that applies to. And with that, there's no other changes to 65. I can pull up the draft resolutions if you would like to look at them. Otherwise, I'll stand for any questions.
Dean.
Mr. Chairman, how much activity is there in this basin in District 65 in their water bank? Is there a lot of activity?
Right, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stevenson, there is quite a bit of activity. Water District 01 has the most and followed by Water District 65. And I apologize, I don't have the acre feet right in front of me, but it is a considerable amount of activity.
Okay, any other questions? Maybe we could have a review of the resolutions today and then we could dispense with that tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thanks. We had two different sets of materials, so we just need to switch over to sharing for the resolution. I have it open under Word. Okay, this one, so this is whereas starting on line 5, Water District 01 Advisory Committee, also known as the Committee of 9, local committee appointed by the board to facilitate lease and rental of stored water in the Upper Snake. Line 9, whereas the Water District 01 Advisory Committee has adopted these amended procedures for 2025, and they intend to facilitate lease and rental of rental pool stored water. And on line 13, the director of the Department of Water Resource has reviewed the local committee procedures and may recommend that the board approves these procedures. And on line 17, now therefore be resolved, amended Upper Snake River rental pool procedures be approved by the board.
Okay, board members, any questions on this resolution? Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
navigate.
maybe this
Yeah.
isn't, I'm sorry to interrupt, but maybe this
No,
isn't
yeah,
the right time to
that's what-
discuss this, but what is happening, if anybody knows, with the lawsuit against the rental pool procedures? Is that case on hold? I haven't heard anything, and maybe we can defer that to Mr.
Brian's gonna kind of tell us where we're at.
Okay,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Barker, no, there's been no action on that since, or no updates on that litigation since your last updated executive session.
okay. So nothing that would affect our decision to approve or disapprove this resolution.
That's correct, Al.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Okay, anything else, board members? Okay, we could look at the other resolution now.
Just need to switch it to this one.
And it's always more difficult with an audience than when you're by yourself.
Looks like that is up now. So these are for the Payette River Basin rental pool procedures, line 5, whereas the Water District 65 Advisory Committee is a local committee appointed by the board to facilitate lease and rental of stored water within the Payette River Basin rental pool. And continuing line 9, whereas the Water District 65 Advisory Committee has adopted these amended procedures for the calendar year 25, pursuant to that they intend to facilitate lease and rental of rented pool stored water, And continuing line 13, the director of the Department of Water Resources has reviewed these procedures and may recommend to the board to approve the rental pool procedures. Finally, in line 17, now therefore be resolved that the amended Payette River Basin rental pool procedures be approved by the board.
Okay, board members, any questions on this resolution? Okay, hearing none from our group or online. That's great. We will be taking these up in the board meeting tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just one more thing, for the board, notification, Water District 63 is not proposing any changes to their rental pool procedures at this time. That's why we don't have a resolution regarding Water District 63's rental pool procedures.
Okay, that's my understanding of how these procedures work. If they're not amended or changed, they stay in effect until they are. Okay, all right, thank you, Mary. Okay,
Chairman, I have a
yeah.
question. How many rental pools like these, just by the districts, are there in the state?
Great question, Mr. Chairman Dean. There are 3 large ones.
Okay.
Upper Snake, Boise, Payette,
Okay.
where there is significant activity and significant reservoir storage. There's a small, let's see, 65K, which is Lake Fork Creek, has their own separate rental pool. It's separate from the rest of 65. That's kind of an artifact of the J Ditch McCall project. There was a rental pool established as a one-off for natural flow water rights on the Lemhi Basin. And that was special legislation with regard to being able to rent natural flow rights to maintain the minimum stream flow water right at the mouth of the Lemhi. I think that's it.
Okay.
There's been consideration of rental pools in some other basins, including the Bear over the years, including the Wood. And for various reasons, they've never been put into place.
Well, Mr. Gibbs.
I'd be reluctant to say there aren't some other basins that are envious of your rental pools and would love to have them in their basins, particularly the Bear. But
And that is an ongoing discussion with our Utah partner about how we
But
might
I'm getting
implement that.
older, and I don't know if it will happen in my lifetime. That's what concerns me. Thank you for indulging me.
Okay, hang in there. Okay, Mr. Patton, we're down to aquifer investigations.
Yes.
Who gets to lead off on that?
Greg Tesh, our hydrology section manager, will give that presentation.
Okay, welcome, Craig.
Hello.
See if this clicker works. Awesome. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Thank you for having me today. My name is Craig Tesh, and I'm the hydrology section manager at IDWR. I stepped into the role last summer, taking over for Sean Vincent, who is happily enjoying retirement. So probably watching basketball today. Today, I'll be giving an update on our hydrology section's work, focusing on our modeling, monitoring, and characterization projects. And just as a aside, that image there is a picture from our drilling campaign on the Mountain Home Plateau. So before jumping into specific projects, I want to give you a high-level overview of the hydrology section and what we do. Our section is made up of 3 groups. First group is the groundwater group, and this group is led by Amy Steimke, and it oversees 2 major statewide water level and water quality monitoring programs. The group also oversees our basin characterization projects and other board-funded projects. It also oversees our Lemhi monitoring project, which is funded by a Pacific Coast Salmon Recovery Fund grant. Next up is our surface water group, and that group is managed by Ethan Geisler, who will be presenting next. And Ethan's group focuses on water rate accounting in 5 different basins. They manage the return flow and spring monitoring program, and they also do a lot of important administrative analyses for the department. Some of you might be familiar with are the surface water methodology and the Swan Falls calculations. Finally, our modeling group, which I manage, is oversees the groundwater models and the technical committees that support those. Some of you may be familiar with Mike McMahon, Jennifer Sugo, who play key roles in that group. So this presentation will focus on the items in red there, which are the board-funded items, the water level monitoring program, the return flow program, the basin projects, and the models that we're developing. So to start, we'll talk about monitoring, which provides the data foundation for pretty much everything we do. The first of those monitoring programs is the statewide groundwater level monitoring program. So this program is responsible for over 1,300 wells across the state. And if you look at the map on the right, you'll see a lot of dots on that map. The blue dots are wells that we measure that are instrumented with data loggers. The red dots are ones we just do manually measure. So we are now over half of our monitoring network is instrumented with data loggers thanks to board funds. Let's see what else we have here. So another thing to keep in mind here is the number of staff that it takes to monitor this. So we have approximately 20 staff statewide that are out monitoring these wells twice a year in the spring and the fall. So currently we have 20 staff out monitoring wells now through the middle of April. So it's a pretty big effort. And this data is really critical. It's critical to administration, modeling, planning, and our project work. And there's a website where you can go to our data portal, and that QR code should take you right there. This is a zoom in of our ESPA, Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer Groundwater and Return Flow Monitoring Network. You can see, again, the dots on the map. There's over 700 of them. We monitor, so it's 700 wells both in the ESPA and in the tributary basins. Again, the blue dots are the wells with data loggers, and the red dots are wells that we manually measure just twice a year. The green triangles are the return flow and spring monitoring sites. And if you'll recall, last spring, I think it was, Tito Sanabria and Colin McKeel presented to the board on that program. And that all this data collected is very important to our ESPA modeling, and it's also used in a lot of other areas. One of the areas that where this groundwater level data is used is Mike McVeigh's storage plot. You guys are familiar with that. So here is Mike's storage plot, kind of reimagined a little bit from what you're used to seeing. At the top, we have cumulative storage change in the aquifer. It's the black line at the top. And the blue bars are discharge from Thousand Springs. And at the bottom is the same storage plotted with discharge at near Blackfoot to Minidoka. So kind of looking at that a little bit differently. So Mike calculates the point at the end of that every year, and then he presents that to the board in August. It's about July, August, somewhere in that time frame. So one of the things we've been asked over time is, can this be updated more often? Can it be updated in real time? And so we are happy to say that we have made progress on that. So this is our, so the groundwater group in summer 2024, started developing a fully telemetered groundwater index well network. So Jennifer Succo led the effort on this, identifying 41 wells that we could add telemetry to. And the board provided funding in the FY25 budget. And so I'm happy to say we're making great progress on this. So several staff, Dennis Owsley, Matthew Wilk, and Ashton Field, have been working hard to get this telemetered. And this map shows the progress towards that network. We have 35 of the 41 wells already telemetered. We have 3 wells pending telemetry. We'll get that done in the next couple months. And then we have 3 wells that we're going to be drilling. So once this is fully built out, Jennifer will calculate the index by normalizing the water levels to changes from the spring of 2016. And then once that's done, we're trying to figure out a way to disseminate that information, put it on a website, something like that. We have to figure that part out. So we'll have a new index to help us monitor the status of the aquifer. Oops, that took off. So that's the meat of our monitoring, which is foundational to everything. And now let's shift gears to basin characterizations. So these studies help us understand aquifer conditions and help us with water management and modeling. You may have seen this chart before. This chart was presented to the legislature by Gary Spackman at one point. It shows our basin characterization studies and the ramp up we've had since 2017. In 2017, we were studying about 3 basins, and now we're studying, as you can see here, up to 9 of them. So it's a big increase in work, and we got a project manager position out of presenting this information, which has been critical to our group. So I talk a lot about basin characterization studies, and I'll be covering some of them coming up. I wanted to show you the main points of each of these. We kind of have a pretty good process down. In each of these, we do a hydrogeologic framework, which is looking at the geology in the aquifer system. We develop water budgets, drill monitoring wells, do groundwater mass measurement events, work with the USGS to put stream gauges in, and we do seepage studies to evaluate the groundwater surface water interactions. And then the last bullet point is really important, is the instrumentation part, where we put data loggers in wells, telemeter sites. If we need a weather station, we put in an agromet station. So whatever we can do to automate our data collection. So we have 3 ongoing basin studies, as you can see on there: Mountain Home, Camas Prairie, and Portneuf. And I'll touch on each of those. I do want to point out that the Raft River project was completed last summer. And if you'll recall, Alexis Clark presented from the Idaho Geologic Survey, I think last September is when she presented. So the first one we'll talk about real briefly is the Mountain Home project. This was started in 2022 after Elmore County requested that we expand the Charger Valley model to incorporate the Mountain Home Plateau. We didn't have the data then. We will have it after this project. So you can see there by the red line, we're close to being done. The latest milestone we reached is the completion of the hydrogeologic framework. So I have that framework here. It's a really nice publication. And if you'd like some copies of this, I have a whole box of them. So, and then the water budget we're anticipating to be done at the end of 2025. So that's going to dovetail nicely into development of the Western Snake Plain Aquifer model, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So these characterizations dovetail right into the modeling efforts. Just a quick slide showing a little bit of work from that. Like I said, the framework report, there's a picture of the cover of it. and the QR code if you want to go directly to the website. And on the right is a groundwater contour map, and that was developed through several mass measurement events, groundwater level mass measurement events between IDWR and the USGS. So that map's in this publication. And we're able to, refine the different groundwater systems there. Moving on to the Camas Prairie project, I don't expect you to absorb this. There's a lot here. This study began in response to a petition from the Big Wood Groundwater Management Area Advisory Committee. It's a mouthful. In 2023, they petitioned to the board and we started the study. And the goal of this was to collect contemporary data to assist with water issues. And this is a 4-year project. You can see by the red line, we're about halfway through. And some of the key updates for this project are that the hydrogeologic framework is underway. The water budget work is underway. We've drilled 5 monitoring wells. We hosted a successful town hall or open house in Fairfield back in September. That was a great event. And the USGS will be conducting a mass measurement event coming up of about 100 to 200 wells. So again, just a quick slide with a little bit of view of the work going on here. The map on the right is a overview map. You can see the dashed line is the Big Wood Groundwater Management Area. The green dots on that map, you can see where Fairfield is. The green dots on the map are wells that we are monitoring groundwater in. The green asterisks are dedicated monitoring wells we've drilled since last spring. So in totality, we have about 24 wells. You can see a couple of USGS gauges over by Magic Reservoir. And then the black triangles there are manual measurements of tributary stream flow that IDWR is measuring to help quantify inflow to Magic Reservoir. And then on the left, you can see a couple pictures of staff working on well drilling campaign. All right, moving on to our Portneuf project. Again, I don't expect you to absorb all this, but it's there if you need to refer to it, if you have any questions. This is also a 4-year project that started in 2023 to help better understand the groundwater, surface water interactions in the basin, help with water management issues, help delineate the aquifer. So there's a lot of questions in the Portneuf. So we've started a project there. This one's a little different than most of our studies. IDWR is doing the bulk of the work. We have the USGS at staffing capacity. So we've taken on most of it with the USGS doing the stream gauging and just the water budget piece. Again, the red line shows we're about halfway through. And some highlights so far is we've installed 4 new stream gauges. We've conducted a water level synoptic and seepage study, and we'll be doing another one at the end of this month. Here's a slide just showing a little bit of the work. There's the Portneuf Basin. Some highlights here are the purple points on there are our new stream gauges. The 2 green ones are existing USGS gauges. So in totality, we have 6 USGS stream gauges in the Portneuf now. And then we also have every black dot on there is a groundwater well where we are measuring for the synoptic. So we've added a lot of measurement sites to the basin. On the left, we have 2 staff doing stream pro measurements for the seepage study. And on the right, we have, I think that's Matthew Wilkin doing a water level measurement during the synoptic event. All right, so let's switch gears now and talk a little bit about groundwater modeling. Much of the data collection and the basin work that you've seen so far kind of dovetails and helps feed those modeling efforts. So this slide shows the four completed groundwater models that we have. The USGS typically builds these models, and the IDWR modelers work closely with them through MTACs and through model review. And then IDWR takes over these models long-term for maintenance and recalibration. And as Sean always like to say, these models require care and feeding and continually refining them with new data and updating them. So we have, I'm just going to run through them. The Spokane Valley up north, we have the SVRP model. That's a collaboration between IDWR, Washington DOE, and the USGS, and that was published in 2007. The Wood River Valley model was published by the USGS in 2019. The one most people know, ESPAM 2.2, was published in 2021, and the Treasure Valley groundwater flow model was published in 2023. So in addition to the existing models, we have 4 models in development. The Big Lost groundwater flow model is in its final phases and should be completed by the end of 2025. The Wood River Valley version 1.2 model, which is being worked on by the recalibration, is being worked on by Alex Moody, should be done by 2026, as is ESPAM 2.3 slated for 2026. The Western Snake Plain Aquifer model, which we affectionately call WESPAM, is slated to be done in 2029. And that's expanding the Treasure Valley model to include the Mountain Home area. So one of the important aspects of our modeling process is stakeholder engagement through our modeling technical advisory committees, or MTACs. So each of the 4 models I just showed you that are in development have an MTAC or will be having an MTAC. And here's the planned next meeting dates. You can see our Western Snake Plain Aquifer model kickoff meeting is, we're hoping to have that started by this summer. So this is an important step because our water users, this is where our water users and their consultants and stakeholders can give input and stay up to date on our modeling efforts and provide transparency. And yeah, it's a good process. So that covers modeling. I have 2 slides left. I put these together. I kind of wanted to zoom out a bit and show you all the projects we're working on. It's not much more expansive beyond what I've shown you already, but to show you kind of the budgets we're working with and our partnership with the USGS and give you kind of a bigger picture. So this table shows the 7 projects we're currently working on with the USGS, as well as 2 additional projects we're working on in-house. Like I said, I won't go into much detail about these. I just wanted to show you what we're working on and emphasize our strong partnership with the USGS. They do outstanding work, and we value their role as a neutral third party. It really helps us in these studies. So the 2 I haven't mentioned is the top one, the Kellstrom project, and that is to help refine the, if you recall, the Mike McVeigh plot with the blue bars. That is helping us revisit that calculation and refining that and bringing that up to date. And then the macrophyte studies, that's to help monitor macrophytes in the mid-snake or weeds in the mid-snake and modeling that and helping manage that, that issue. And then finally, I put together this table because I've been getting a lot of questions, and it's come up recently, is how many gauges does IDWR and the board manage annually? Kind of what does our commitment look like? So I put this together. It breaks down our commitment, including funding contributions from IDWR, the board, water users, and USGS match funds. And this does not include gauges for projects like the Port NIF or any of those projects where money is already set aside for some of those gauge efforts. Now you can see most of our effort goes into the 80 gauges, this first line statewide surface water monitoring network. Those are 80 gauges that are funded by trustee and benefit general funds. And 50 of those are funded cooperatively between IDWR and the USGS. And then 30 of those are the majority of it is funded by the water users. So that's a pretty big network and one that I manage, and it's a pretty big effort, but just kind of wanted to give you all a scope of that. I don't think I've ever put it in a table like this. So it just helps visualize the scale of our investment in stream gauging And it's just absolutely critical to everything we do. So, yeah, data collection is a big part of what we do, and like to see that keep going. So,
Joanne has a question.
Mr. Chair, have you noticed any hiccups in the USGS funding
Recently,
recently?
I have been talking to the USGS several times a week in the past month as they go through changes, and I think right now the stream gauging program is fine from what I'm hearing from them. Their studies section took a hit with the probationary firings, which I understand are being reinstated. So I think it's in flux, and it's looking like it might be okay. So, yeah.
Mr. Chair,
yes.
it seems that the monitoring of these gauges is important to decisions being made on water use in this area. So keeping an eye on that would be, I think, important.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Cole-Hansen, absolutely. And we're also keeping an eye on the NRCS and the Snowtel sites. And so a lot of these stations that are collecting weather data are really important to what we do.
Okay,
Oh,
thank you.
so that's all I had.
That's, okay, other questions?
Chairman,
Dean,
when is you said 26 for East Span 2.3?
Correct.
When, any idea what time in 26 is?
I do not, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stevenson, I don't know the exact date other than we have it slated for 2026. We do the updates for eSpam we try to do them every 5 years. So I could ask Mike, but we just have 2026 slated.
That's fine.
Mike's expressions telling me it's still variable at this point.
That's what I.
Sometime between January and December. Okay, other questions? Okay, great work.
Thank you.
It's a lot of work that has to be done so that not only this board, but other water interests across the state can utilize the information. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your support as well.
Mr. Chairman, just to follow up on a couple of Craig's comments. First, with regard to stream gauging, it's pretty hard to administer water rights without stream gauges. Okay. Number two, without Snowtel sites, it's pretty hard to manage reservoirs. And number three, without the aquifer investigations, it's pretty hard to know what we have in those other aquifers. So just a few follow-up remarks.
I agree totally. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, break. Okay, I think we're gonna take about a 5 to 7 minute break, depending on how long it takes our online people to do their break. We'll be back very shortly. We're in recess.
So you want water bank with
The stream gauge so far.
We've been trying to.
How do you have to get it together with Utah, wouldn't it? They have to.
And
Some of them.
Utah's had a hang out.
Yes, see.
of a snow-till site, we need those.
Okay, Jennifer, if I were to drop the gavel, are we back online? Okay, we will call the meeting back to order. The next order of business is water supply update.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thanks. Yeah. Chairman, members of the board, thanks for having me today. My name's Ethan Geisler. As Craig said earlier, I'm the surface water group supervisor in the hydrology section. I'm going to replace David Hokema today. He usually gives this presentation, but he's actually at the water supply committee meeting today with the other experts. So I'll try to fill in the best I can. So this on the right here, we have the US Drought Monitor. This is a national product that the department actually provides some input to. I think it gives a good perspective on kind of where we're at. For the most part, state's doing pretty well overall as far as drought goes. But there is a little bit of moderately dry and abnormally dry conditions in this kind of eastern border, as well as the upper snake here in the panhandle. So we'll get into that. Some of these maps will kind of to show that same trend.
Hey, Ethan, can I ask you before you move off that slide?
Yep.
Even though you already have. If we were to look on the Wyoming side of the border, the rest of the upper snake drainage, would it concur with what we're seeing
I think so.
in the
Yeah.
watershed on the Idaho side
Yeah.
of the border?
Yeah, it'd probably be pretty symmetrical there. So,
Okay, thank you.
yep. So we'll look at temperature and precip first. So this is mean temperature from October through February of this year. This just gives you an idea of what the temperature is compared to normal. So we've been a little bit above normal for most of the state. And then you can see here in this kind of eastern border area, it's a little bit warmer than the rest of the state. Precip follows that same trend, a little bit less precip on that eastern border. You can also see here that we've gotten tons of precip in the Oahes since October. And so that'll also come out in the SWE maps that I'm going to show here coming up. This is the SPEI index. This is just another drought index that kind of combines the temperature and precip. So you can see kind of where we're on the lower end of that drought index and on the higher end. The Oahes are doing pretty well, that western region of the state. So that's just since February. So since March 1st, we've gotten kind of normal conditions, depends on what basin you're in, a little bit above normal. And then precip is really where we've seen a discrepancy between the north and the southern part of the state. So the southern part of the state's gotten quite a bit of precip. Northern part hasn't gotten quite as much. And so this is compared to normal conditions. David does this table each year. And what it shows here on the left side is the different basins starting in the northern panhandle, moving down into the southern basins all the way to the Bear. And then on the top here is the different weeks. So he tracks snowpack. So I like to show this map or this table because it gives you an idea of the percentiles and how they change over time. So the percentiles are from 1 to 100, with 1 being this red color, 100 being the dark blue color. So you can see there's no real pattern. We're kind of in this is the most recent snowpack here. We're a little bit wetter than normal in some basins, normal in about half of them, and then drier than normal in a couple. And so we'll go through each of those basins. Many of you are familiar with this snowpack map the department puts out. We are in the process of revamping this a little bit, but this is data collected from the NRCS SNOTEL sites in their website. And then we just plotted on with certain basins in mind. And David's also been working on this, which takes into account all these Snake River basins and puts them in a pie chart based on their diversion amounts that they divert for surface water. And so it gives you a perspective on, even though the western part of the state's doing really well, that's not a giant portion compared to the upper Snake that we see in that southern basin. So I think we're going to incorporate these two into a map, and that'll be the new product that we send out. And so I'm going to go through each of the basins here. I'll start in the Bear, move into the Snake, and then work my way downstream into the lower Snake and then up into the Panhandle. So in the Bear, we track this one pretty closely because we run water right accounting during the irrigation season. Not doing quite as good as last year. I'm going to show quite a few of these plots. There's snow water equivalent plots provided by the NRCS, and they have the 2024 water year, which is this brownish orange color. The black is 2025. The median is this green line that you can see right in the middle of this interquartile range, that's the colored lines. And then the colored shading, I should say. And then there's the median peak SWE. So that's just taking all the peaks from each year and figuring out where the median of that is. And so you can see 2025, we're doing pretty well, above average, but below 2024. And then if we move over to the Bear Lake, where they capture a lot of that water, this is estimates from Pacific Core. And on March 18th, they were at 59.18, and they're projected to get up to 59.20 around June 8th with a 50th percentile inflows. So this bodes well for the Bear River Basin. Below Bear Lake, anything above 59.14 gets a full allocation. So as long as they're projecting above 59.14 for the season, they get a full allocation for their irrigation needs. So barring anything really drastic, I think they'll have a full allocation this year and next year, which is good. Moving into the Snake, it was pretty dire early on in the calendar year, February timeframe. We were getting pretty low levels there, but we were also pretty low last year. But we got some good storms over the past few months, especially recently, that's bumped that up. And we're at about 98% of the peak here. I listened in on the Snake River Ops meeting last week, and I can get into that a little bit. But the March 1st forecast, there's 3 different forecasts that are produced. There's the joint forecast from the Bureau and the Army Corps. They were showing about 3,300 calf. NRCS was showing about 3,600 calf, and the Northwest River Forecast Center was showing about 3,300 calf. So we'll get those updates in April. But the Northwest River Forecast Center, they do daily updates, and that's what this plot is on the right. So you can kind of see each of these is a forecast for each day. So that median there is the red. That's what I'm showing here on the left in the 3,500 for right here. And so you can see kind of how it progresses throughout the year. We were kind of drying out, kind of lower forecast was being forecasted, or lower water supply was being forecasted. And as we got those precip events and the snowpack building, we're getting closer to that 30-year normal, which is this green line. So wet spring, cool conditions would get us up in that higher realm. But yeah, we'll wait to see in April what those forecasts show. And like I said, I listened to the Snake operations meeting last Thursday. There's some really good information there. It sounded like most of the reservoirs were going to fill potentially. As you can see here, this is a teacup diagram from the Bureau. Most of the reservoirs are pretty full. Then maybe the upper ones need a little bit extra inflow there. Currently, there's no flow over Milner. They were talking about flood risk management releases, but they weren't quite sure. And I think this Upper Snake Reservoir system kind of tells the story of that. So this green line was last year's Upper Snake Reservoir system fill. The blue line is this year's, and the red line is the median. So last year, if you remember, we had some spill over Milner for flood risk management, and that was them kind of digging this hole or evacuating space. And it just remains to be seen if they're going to take this all the way up to fill, or if they're going to have to evacuate some space. It'll kind of depend on what the spring looks like here coming up. As we move into some of the tributary basins, especially on the north side here, looking at the Big Wood, compared to 2024, snowpack is looking really good, above the median for both the peak and just the time series. If we look at the Magic Reservoir, they're a little bit lower than they were last year. So this green line was last year's value. 2025 is this year's. They're also below the median. But I think with this snowpack, they should be in pretty good shape to get close to fill or fill that. Big Lost looking pretty good as well, similar to the Big Wood. And if you remember from last year, in Mackey Reservoir, they had the gate issue where they had to draw the reservoir down almost to the bottom. So you can see this green line from last year, they were in pretty bad shape in the reservoir, but were able to fill with their snowpack from last year. And this year they're in much better shape. So I expect them to fill with this data set. Moving into the south side, tributary basin. So the Bruno had a really good year last year, as you can see here in this orangish brown line. We're approaching that this year for 2025 with the recent storms. And we track this for minimum flows at the Murphy gauge for the Water Resource Board, right, and Idaho Power Swan Falls Settlement Agreement. And so you can see here the blue line, we've had some low elevation snow runoff events earlier in the calendar year. I think we've kind of gotten into some runoff events here. And I think we'll continue to have some runoff events, but we keep an eye on that in March. Salmon Falls, similar to last year. And their reservoir is doing much better than last year too. So I expect them to fill this year as well. And we keep an eye on those basins. Many of you are familiar with this graph. This is the AADF that we run at the department in my group to track those minimum flows for the settlement agreement. So this, the minimum flows are 5,600 during the non-irrigation season, 3,900 during the irrigation season. And then we track different statistics for that, as well as Milner flows and the AADF here in black. So this gets a little bit close some years in this end of March time period where Watershik 2 can turn on and maybe the Bruno doesn't run off quite as much as we're expecting. So I think we're good for now. We're about 800 CFS above that minimum, but that Bruno and Salmon Falls tributary basins are something we keep an eye on for this. Keep moving down into the Snake, downstream. Looking at the Boise, Boise's gotten a really big bump recently. This was actually the snow marker from earlier in the week. They got a foot of snow, and you can see that here. We've seen this in kind of the western bases, the stair-step pattern where we have a big snow event drying out, and then a big snow event dries out a little bit, big snow event. So you can see that stair-step pattern, and so they're in really good shape. One thing to note is the Bogus Basin Snowtail site is actually setting records for their snow water equivalent and snow depth. So you can see here, this is for this time of year, it's above anything we've seen, even 2023, where they set the record later in the year. So we'll keep an eye on that. As far as the reservoirs go for that basin, they're looking pretty good. They're lower than last year, but with that snowpack, they've actually been doing flood risk management releases, stepping up flows in the Boise River. If you walk by that at all this week, you see increased flows. And I think they'll continue that for the time being. You can see them start to dig. This curve has started to turn. So they're starting to put a little bit of evacuate a little bit of water so they can fill with that snowpack that they're expecting to come down. Same for the Payette, similar trend, stair-step pattern. Really big increase over the past week. They're also expected to fill, and they may even be evacuating some space as the reservoirs have flatlined in Deadwood and Cascade. The Weezer is also doing really well, above median, above last year, so expecting them to do pretty good. And then the Owahis, they could probably use a little bit less snow if that can be the case, but they've had 2 really good years of snowpack. Last year was really high. This year's doing really well. I know they were in flood risk management releases about a month ago or so. So they've been monitoring that, the Bureau and the Army Corps. And as you can see here, they've been trying to make some space for quite a while now, turning that down so they don't flood people out. Moving into the lower Snake River basins, this one is where it starts to change the snowpack a little bit. So you can see Salmon River at Whitebird here. Started out below that green line. It's kind of hidden behind there, but then we've kind of ramped up when you take into account all of the basin. And you can see that in here too. We're above the median at the Swee and the Salmon Basin, which is that big swath in the map, in the middle of the map. But whenever we look into some of the sub basins, it's not quite as high of an increase. So the Lemhi, which the board may be interested in for some minimum flows, they're at right about median on record. So something we'll keep an eye on. And a warm, hot, dry spring might not bode that well for the runoff, but we'll keep an eye on that. Moving into the Clearwater, this is where we start to move below the median. So water supply forecast a little bit below the 30-year normal. Swee in that basin is a little bit below the median, but the recent week has bumped that up, which has been nice. And then northern Idaho, this is the Spokane Basin, so below that median. Pend Oreille is also below the median, and then the water supply forecasts here kind of show that same tell the same tale there. So, and many of you know the Pend Oreille Albany Falls Dam has been dealing with that spillway gate issue, so they've been operating that reservoir pretty conservatively anyways, up in that realm. So another northern Idaho basin is the Priest, which the board operates. They're at about median, and the forecasts have been kind of trending up recently. So we'll see how the spring shakes out for that. And moving into what kind of dictates how the runoff occurs is some of the spring precip and temperatures that we see and some of the soil moisture. So this is the 10-day QPF, which is basically the deviation from normal. So we're expecting in the lower part of the state to be a little bit drier than normal. In the upper part of the state, a little bit wetter than normal, which is probably good. They could use a little bit of snowpack building there still. And then the 8 to 14 day precipitation outlook from NOAA is showing similar trends, a little bit higher in the panhandle, southern part of the states, maybe a little bit above normal, but not too drastic. And then precip, I know the Boise area is supposed to hit 80 degrees next week potentially, so we're definitely going to get warm, maybe even melt some snowpack. And the 8 to 14 days looking pretty similar as that pressure system moves out over the US. The other thing we keep a track of is the soil moisture. So this is a satellite product from Grace Satellite. It basically gives you an idea of what the soil moisture is looking like. And this dictates runoff efficiency. So in the northern panhandle here, you can see the outline of Idaho. We're a little bit drier than normal with the soil moisture. So maybe when you're looking at some of those water supply forecasts, I would take into account some of the lower end. But as you move into some of these other basins like the Oahes, maybe on the ESBA here, you can start to maybe anticipate some of those median percentile forecast ranges. So, and like always, if you have any questions, you can reach out to me or David Hokome. He's our water supply specialist. He can answer a lot of questions. And I just want to leave you guys with this cool picture that the NRCS took and put in their water supply outlook report of a fox checking out one of the snow-tell basins in the Payette. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ethan. Questions for Ethan? Okay, Al or Brian O? I guess I should have confirmed you come back.
I'm back and I don't have any questions. This was
Okay.
This was really
Brian
good.
O's back and I don't have any questions either.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Ethan.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Okay, next up, cloud seeding. Kayla? While you're getting set up, Kayla, in case I forget to tell you later, that was one fine presentation you gave to IGWA yesterday.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You did a really good job.
Thank you very much. All right, let's see. All right, well, thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and members of the board and respected guests that we have both in person and online. So my name is Kayla Golden. I am the Water Resource Board's Cloud Seeding Program Manager, and I will be providing an update on our program today. If my screen wants to move. So very briefly, I'm going to go over some programmatic information, update on our current operations, and then a very brief update on some of the other things that we're working on for this program. As a very quick reminder for folks, all of the information on cloud seeding, including current monthly and annual reports, can be found on the Water Resource Board's website, including a number of different items, including history, science, current projects, and program information. So if you're looking for information on the cloud seeding program, this is your best resource. High level, we do have currently 4 programs authorized in the state of Idaho. The first one being the one you all participate in under the Idaho Collaborative Cloud Seeding Program. We then have Idaho Power Company's Payette River Basin Project, the High Country Resource Conservation and Development Project in East Idaho, and then the state of Utah as well holds some generators in the southern portion of our state that support their northern region projects. Really briefly to orient everybody, we do have 2 different project regions in the southern portion of the state. To be clear, we do not operate cloud seeding in northern Idaho, just the southern portions. So the west central region, including the Payette River Basin, the Boise River Basin, and the Wood River Basin. And then over in eastern Idaho, we have one large area to support the basin. And so our collaborative program in eastern Idaho is overlain by the High Country Resource Conservation and Development. And there is some coordination of forecasting between those programs. So I'm going to go through this very quickly. This is information that has also been presented at our Upper Snake Advisory Committee, as well as the Water Supply Water Supply Update meetings. So largely, we are running a little bit under normal for our normal operations, as you'll see. I can't even see. Oh, in the Boise River Basin this year. So February, we did ramp up a little bit compared to normal with a few more seeding days. Moving over to the Wood River Basin, same story. So January was a little bit less than normal for seeding opportunities, and things have ramped up just a little bit in February. All across the West Central Mountain region, we did have 2 suspensions in the month of February due to extreme avalanche danger. So our program operators do monitor those things for avalanche, rain on snow events, and a number of different things where we may suspend operations so that we don't have any potential to contribute to those events. Upper Snake River Basin, a similar story. We have had a little bit less than normal seeding opportunities into February, maybe a little bit more for airborne in January. Moving over to the Payette River Basin, February did ramp up quite a bit for the Payette River Basin in terms of seeding hours, a little bit less than normal for some of our flight hours. High Country RC&D program. Those are all of our manual generators that we have over in eastern Idaho, about 25 total manual generators that is run under that program. January saw about 213 total hours. And same thing for their program, a little bit of a ramp up in seeding opportunities in the month of February. But no reported suspensions over in the Upper Snake River Basin, either for ours, the collaborative program, or the High Country RC&D. Northern Utah project. So they do report on their entire Northern Utah project, while they do only have about 3 generators across in our state. And same thing for the state of Utah. They did see a little bit less than normal seeding opportunities for January. And the state of Utah did also see an increase in the number of opportunities in the month of February. So high level, the other projects that we have going on for the cloud seeding program, as you're aware, the cloud seeding analysis. So we did just wrap up our last presentation to the water users. That has now been rolled out to all 3 districts who participate, as well as IGWA. We are also working on continued model development that does support this cloud seeding analysis. And so those are some things that we will bring before you all in the next couple of months to consider some budget items as we move forward to continue on with the cloud seeding analysis. Other items that the board will have to consider coming up, we do have the final results of our Lemhi River Basin feasibility and design study. So we will be looking for a time to get that all presented to you. Other items on the list are the Bear River Basin collaboration. So as I had mentioned previously, the state of Utah has put before us a large proposal to collaborate on a cloud seeding project in the Bear River Basin. And the long and short of that proposal, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 million. In that proposal, it does include the incorporation of drone technology. Basically, all of the ground generators that were proposed by NCAR in the feasibility and design study that they did for us as well. And a lot of those costs include validation studies. So this would be proposed as a 5-year pilot project with a validation aspect. And so some of those costs are wrapped into that cost proposal. Other items that we are working on are the liquid propane investigation, silver iodide assessment, and some program administration items, which I will give you all a brief update on. So in terms of the liquid propane investigation, this is something that we have since partnered with the state of Utah, who has now taken on the cost of the principal investigator to lead this research. And so a brief summary, liquid propane is an alternative seeding agent that can be used at warmer temperatures than silver iodide. And it does not rely on orographic winds, so it may provide an opportunity to do seeding in other areas. And so currently, you all have invested into a number of different weather instruments to support this investigation that is happening in the Little Camas Prairie. We did start actual seeding this year. So Idaho Power does have 1 liquid propane generator that they are supporting in kind to this investigation. And to date, since December, we've had a total of 11 storm events that we've that we've observed. 9 of those were seeded storms. 1 was a dry run, 1 natural conditions. And I'm happy to report that 3 of the IOP periods that we witnessed so far, we did see a possible seeding signature. And so this is very exciting. However, there's a lot more work to be done on this analysis, and we will be expecting a report, I believe, early in this summer on this winter's operations. The next item, if you recall, you all have partnered, or we have partnered with other states and public agencies that are a part of the North American Weather Modification Council to collaborate on an assessment of silver iodide. And so to be clear, this is really just an effort to confirm our statistical findings that there's really a very low probability of ever having impacts from silver iodide. And so this is intended to be a literature review to assess seeding operations across all current projects in the Western US, and really just affirm our findings, our statistical findings, that there is not really a probability for silver iodide to ever cause any type of environmental impacts. And so we are estimating that report to be available sometime this fall. The other item that's currently on hold right now, if you recall, back in September, I came before you all with some updates to our authorization and reporting criteria. So when the board did first pass a resolution on authorizations and reporting, it was noted in that resolution that there would need to be continual updates based on new information and findings. And so in September, I rolled out some new proposed updates to you all. And then the next steps that I told you all I would carry forward with were to bring these back to our operators to assess whether these changes were feasible and what limitations may exist. And then put this criteria before our legal department for their review and assessment. And so those steps have occurred. And currently the next step for this is to consider a resolution to adopt the amended criteria. However, in light of pending legislation, that one is on hold until we get a determination on the current legislation, which I believe is under its 2nd amendment and on 3rd reading this morning as we are speaking right now. So, Mr. Chairman, that is all I have for you this morning, and I will stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Kayla. Questions for Kayla? Al or Brian O?
Mute.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, nothing.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Kayla. I appreciate you shepherding this program along.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, next up, Mr. Patton, Administrative Rules Update.
Yeah, Eric Moe will present an update on where all the administrative rules processes are at currently.
Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity to give a brief update on our administrative rules and rulemaking efforts. Since my last update, we presented 4 of our zero-based review rulemakings and 1 rule amendment to the legislature, the Senate and House committees, and they all passed. As a reminder, those rules were the adjudication rules, the beneficial use examination rules, the injection well rules, and the well construction rules. Those are the ZBRs, and the 1 rule amendment was for the conjunctive management rules for surface and groundwater. As far as the next steps on those, my understanding is the legislature is putting together a concurrent resolution right now. And if everything goes as planned, they'd be in full effect on July 1st of this year. So fingers crossed. For the 2025-2026 rulemaking season, we're currently working on 3 ZBRs, zero-based reviews. They include 370204, the Shoshone-Bannock Tribal Water Supply Bank rules, 370307, the stream channel alteration rules, and finally 370312, the Water District 34 distribution rules. So the tribal water supply bank rules and the stream channel alteration rules, those are board rules, and then the water distribution rules are for IDWR. But we submitted the notice of intent to promulgate these rules last Wednesday on March 12th. So they're on track to publish in the April Administrative Bulletin, which goes out on April 2nd, I believe. Following the required notification period, we'll be holding our first round of public meetings. The Shoshone Bannock Tribal Water Supply Bank rules are scheduled for May 14th at 1:30 PM, which is a Wednesday. The stream channel alteration rules, that first public meeting is scheduled for April 30th at 1 PM. And then finally, the Water District 34 rules, that first public meeting is scheduled for April 23rd at 1 PM. And I think that sums up my brief update. Happy to answer any questions Mr. Chairman or the board may have.
Okay, board members, any questions for Eric? Okay, online, anybody? Okay, thanks, Eric. Appreciate your efforts in the rulemaking area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Next up, legislation of interest. Welcome, Garrick Baxter. You're going to walk us through and highlight the events that have been occurring at the Capitol.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Yeah, we're coming closer to the end of the legislative session. Looks like the legislature has some budget issues that they're going to have to work through, some of course, which impact us. I'm not going to highlight the budget issues today or the budget bills because I know other people will talk with you about those. I'm going to talk about all the other bills that are coming through that might be of interest to the board. I'm going to kind of go on a fairly high level overview of these bills. If at any point in time you have questions and want me to stop and fill in a little more detail, please don't hesitate to stop me. I'm happy to go into more detail as we go along. All right, with that, Mr. Chairman, we'll jump right into House Bill number 9. This is a House bill that I reported to you guys last session or our last board meeting, talked a little bit about it. This relates to legislation from the Office of Administrative Hearings. And we had concern that they were proposing legislation that would impact the rules of procedure of both the department and the boards. The good news is that we were able to work with them to get the legislation modified, and they put in a specific exclusion related to our rules of procedure. And you'll see here that language, that bill was amended and that language was inserted. And also they removed some language that we had flagged, but it was really about providing notice, and it caused us a lot of concern, the vagueness of the language. And so they took that out. That's something that we're going to talk about in the future with them. But as for right now, they took out the most concerning pieces to us and had that amended. That bill has now passed the House, passed the Senate, and is on to the governor. Again, they addressed the main issues of concern that we had with their legislation. Going next to House Bill 14, what's commonly referred to by at least one of the DOGE acts. This bill requires state agencies to review the code sections that affect them. So the board will need to go forward and look at the various sections. For example, Chapter 17 has provisions related to the board. That piece of legislation, well, let me back up a little bit. So we'll have to go through and review those and find any provisions that are out of date or we believe are inefficient now or can be struck. That bill has now passed the House and the Senate and has been signed by the governor. Now you note that I highlighted the effective date right there. It was effective back in February. It gives us until September 1st of 2025. Yes, I said 2025 to undertake this effort. So 6 months. So the legal staff will be working with board staff and department staff to be undertaking this effort. We haven't quite officially jump-started that, but we're going to be doing that very quickly. You might recall this was similar to an effort that we undertook previously. We'll kind of dust off our previous work, see if there's any additional areas that we can identify overlap or redundancies. And then, of course, that'll be brought to the board to discuss at a later board meeting. Any questions about that piece of legislation?
Board members, questions? Dean.
Yeah, would you just mention, didn't we just do that same thing? Didn't Governor Little have another, and maybe governors before that, we wanted to take stuff off the book before we put more on?
Yeah.
So is this going to be a lot different than that or just a continuation of that?
Mr. Chairman, Member Stevenson, I see it to be a continuation of that. You're correct. When Governor Little came in, he came in and asked us to do a similar exercise. So the real low-hanging fruit, I think, is gone. But that doesn't mean that we won't go through and take a close look at everything and say, you know, are there additional areas? Really, the timeframe is going to be the challenge for us, and we'll do what we can do in the timeframe that's allocated.
Perhaps clarify for me, I think that initial initiative of Governor Little's had to do with regulation reduction. And this is more just looking at obsolete code.
My recollection is we also did that for legislation as well.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
We did both, Representative Raybould.
Okay. Al, he's got his hand up.
Yeah, my question, Mr. Chairman, for Garrick is the September 1 deadline, is the concept in this bill that we're supposed to provide proposed legislation, amendments to proposed legislation, proposed amendments to the code so that they can get them in line for next year's legislature? Or are we this is just a report, or is this supposed to be, here's what we want to do, and here's a proposed piece of legislation to accomplish that?
Mr. Chairman, Member Barker, it's my understanding legislation says to provide recommendations for removal. So I think what we'll do is identify language and make recommendations how the statutes could be tweaked to remove those outdated provisions.
But that September deadline, isn't that typically when the state agencies are required to get all of their proposals into the governor's office or the legislative services?
Mr. Chairman, Member Barker, that's generally the time frame, although it's moved a lot recently. I don't know still if it's September 1st right now. It's
okay.
A little ahead of that to get to the governor.
Okay, Al, I just reading what Garrick's got here, and maybe you don't have access to this deck of bill information, but it said review code sections related to their agency and report unnecessary, obsolete, and outdated provisions. So I think step one is catalog them, and then beyond that, to the degree if we do catalog and report, if we have something we want to see changed, we'd want to do that as quickly as we could. But I don't think we have to have a solution to every problem by September 1st, as I read this.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I agree. That's what the deck says, but I didn't know what the expectation of the legislature or the governor's office was. If they expected us to have something in place or just recommendations, because we can have, it's going to take a lot longer to have proposals to change rather than just look at what there might be, look at areas that might be and report on what they, look on areas that might need to be changed and report on those as opposed to here's the solution. So I guess we'll see what the expectations are.
Mr. Chairman, Member Barker, we haven't got a lot of feedback, or at least I haven't seen a lot of feedback from the governor's office yet. I think they've been pretty busy with the legislative session. My guess is as the legislative session comes to an end, we might get some more feedback from the governor's office as to how to approach this. And I'll make sure that's shared with the board members.
Okay.
All right.
We can move on.
Next bill, House Bill 161. This relates to flood control districts. It's really, I call this kind of a cleanup bill related to flood control districts, modified certain things related to their boundaries and notice provisions and compensation and procurement powers. Pretty straightforward. This passed both the House and the Senate and is making its way over to the governor as we speak. House Bill 191 related to the board's terms of office of board members. This was introduced back in early February, and it appears to be held in committee. No action has been taken on that since February. It's just been sitting there. Moving on to House Bill 194. This relates to groundwater districts. Bill would allow groundwater districts to create divisions when additional lands are annexed and changes the timing associated with assessments for those groundwater districts. This also is pretty straightforward. I included this bill because I know a number of the members of the board work with, thank you, a number of the groundwater districts. So just wanted y'all to be aware about this one. Passed the House and passed the Senate and is making its way over to the governor as we speak. Next one, House Bill 197, concerning the mandatory recharge on ESPA. This bill would have required the board to exercise its recharge water rights when those recharge water rights are in priority. This one was also introduced back in early February and has been held up there and seems to be held in committee at this point in time.
Just for everybody's information, yesterday, IGWA approved an agreement between IGWA and Idaho Power regarding this issue. And so I don't think there's going to be any attempt for that bill to move this session based on that agreement.
Good news. Next, House Bill 334, related to the managed recharge goal. This bill would have required that the board amend the state water plan, increasing their recharge limit up to 350. This did pass the House, but it seemingly languished, at least at this point in time, over in the Senate. The Senate received it and it was referred to the committee, but it hasn't moved there since, well, early mid-March. I will talk about a concurrent resolution that addresses this issue a little bit later. So I can speculate as to, the fact that the concurrent resolution has moved through might be the reason why that is not moving forward at this time, but that's my speculation. Next bill is House Bill 364, another one of the DOGE acts. This creates a task force that would study 3 areas of state government: regulatory accountability, budget accountability, and government operations in an effort to make government more efficient. It would require that agencies go out to, or the committee is going to go out and study ways to consolidate and streamline basically the services that are provided by agencies out there. So this one has passed the House and was referred over to the State Affairs Committee. I have no insider baseball as to whether or not this one will move forward, but again, it's passed the House at least and is over before the Senate. We'll keep a close eye on that. So one of the House Concurrent Resolutions, House Concurrent Resolution number 3, we've talked about this one previously, and pretty straightforward. It just continues the legislative committee that studies natural resources issues on an interim basis and extends that for 2 years. That was adopted by the House, Senate, and has been delivered over to the Secretary of State for registering, so is in effect. Now, before I jump from the House bills over to the Senate bills, there have been 2 additional House bills that have just popped up on the legislative website, and tip of the cap to Paul Arrington for pointing these ones out to me. House Bill, and this is not in your notes, I wasn't able to update it. It just popped up on the legislative website today that I was able to get the details. House Bill 413, which requires agencies to identify all employee positions that have been vacant for at least 180 days and eliminating all positions that have been open for at least a year. And it also requires agencies to report on employee travel. This bill is being sponsored by Speaker of the House, Mike Moyle. I'm not sure how many positions IDWR has that have been open a year. Haven't had a chance to talk to HR about that yet. Something that we'll quickly take a look at and start analyzing the potential effect to both IDWR staff and board staff. So this is something we're going to want to keep a close look on moving forward. There was a parallel bill introduced about the same time, House Bill 414, also sponsored by Speaker Moyle, includes language similar to 413, but adds an additional provision related to travel for statewide officers and requires that statewide officers report out-of-state travel to the Secretary of State related to any travel related to government purposes. And so adds an additional reporting requirement. So those two bills, 413 and 414, we'll be keeping a close eye on as the legislative session comes to an end. Just wanted to make you guys aware about those particular bills. Let's move over to the Senate bills. First one, Senate Bill 1040, relates to irrigation districts. How's that directors or officers of a board of an irrigation district can have an interest in a recharge contract so long as no profits are shared with the director or officer directly. That bill has passed the Senate, passed the House, and has been signed by the governor. Senate Bill 1041 relates to distribution of laterals. I talked a little bit about this one last time. This bill is being moved forward at the request of Bigwood Canal Company. It modifies the ability of entities to appoint lateral managers to now include canal companies. Previously, it was irrigation districts or IDWR, so broadens that. That bill has passed the Senate and passed the House and has been signed by the governor. Next is Senate Bill 1060. This was introduced by Senator Guthrie, who you might recall is from the Portneuf area. And this bill would have prohibited curtailment of surface water when essentially surface water users are not able to make a corresponding delivery call against groundwater users in that particular basin. This bill was introduced into the Senate back in early February and appears to be held in committee at this point in time. Next is Senate Bill 1061. This bill requires the director to provide first notice and an opportunity for hearing before amending a methodology order. Further requires that the director amend such order by December 1st prior to the year the order goes into effect. So again, this really is kind of a bill that relates to the delivery call proceedings that took place this last summer. There was criticism as to the timing in which the former director Spackman issued his methodology order, and this legislation directly goes to that particular issue. This legislation passed the Senate, passed the House, and is making its way over to the governor. All right. Next to Senate Bill 1064 as amended, relating to cloud seeding. The board might recall this legislation had some language that was particularly concerning to those that reviewed it the first opportunity. It had a proposed requirement for the board to compile and publish an annual environmental impact assessment report. I'm happy to report that the bill as amended, that requirement has been taken out and has more general reporting requirements included in it now. Now, the most latest amendment to this, you'll notice that it's been amended twice now. The most latest amendment also requires a map showing locations of generators that are included. So this, you'll see I kind of included all the current status just to let you understand. It was introduced back in early February. It's been amended and was reported out without recommendation as amended, and it's on its third hearing, at least as to the Senate. So it has a way to go, but just wanted to make you aware with regards to that legislation and where it's at. Moving next to Senate Bill 1065, related to weather modification. This bill prohibits various aspects of weather modification. It was introduced back in early February. And although I don't have it listed here, it appears that it's also been held in committee. It hasn't made any progress since first being introduced. Moving next to Senate Bill 1067 as amended. This bill, the key aspect of this bill, I think from at least the board and the department standpoint, is that it would have made it more difficult, or will make it more difficult for any agency to pass temporary rules. Sometimes temporary rules are rules that we put in place when we realize, we have a problem, we need to immediately put in a rule out there for various reasons. It heightens the scrutiny associated with that and requires that we can only put those in place in emergency situations. That bill has passed the Senate and is making its way over to the House at this point in time. Next, we'll move to Senate Bill 1082, irrigation district assessment liens. This bill clarifies that irrigation assessment liens are top priority, that take stand in front of all other mortgage or other liens that are out there. This bill has passed the Senate, passed the House, and is making its way over to the governor. Next bill, Senate Bill 1083, related to domestic water use. And this is one we have worked on for a number of years. And I gave you an update at the last board meeting with regards to that one. And Mr. Arrington is still here, and I commend him on his efforts and diligence in getting this domestic legislation moved through.
This may be Paul's white whale.
I think it is. He's going to have to write the law review article on the history of this bill and everything. So the good news is, well, just the highlight, the key highlights from my standpoint are, number one, it would allow domestic water uses to be stacked in the future going forward, so long as it's only for in-home use. That's important. This was a nod to developers out there that they can put in a well and now develop multiple domestic water rights out of a well in a subdivision. Also key from my standpoint is that it provides that in a subdivision in an area that has been identified as water critical by the director, that means either there's been a moratorium or groundwater management area, et cetera, the domestic exception will only apply to an in-home use or for stock watering purposes. So if, for example, you want to have out-of-house irrigation associated with a subdivision, you're going to have to either file a new application for permit or go to your local irrigation district and try to put in a pressurized system using water from the local district. Those are, from my standpoint, really the key highlights of that legislation. It passed the Senate and passed the House and is making its way over to the governor as we speak. Senate Bill 1084, water supply bank forfeiture clock. This bill provides that the 5-year forfeiture clock starts over when a water right is removed from the water supply bank. Water rights were treated a little bit differently on their way coming out, and this kind of unifies the approach of how forfeiture is applied to water rights coming out of the water supply bank. Moving from Senate bills to joint memorials and concurrent resolutions. We have a Senate Joint Memorial 101, which effectively asks the Bureau of Reclamation, Army Corps of Engineer, and state agencies to study and work together to explore new storage projects, and including the reconstruction of Teton Dam. I think that gets a lot of people's attention. That bill has been, or that memorial has been adopted by the Senate and reported out of committee at the House with a do pass recommendation and is pending before the House currently. And last but not least, Senate Concurrent Resolution 110. Now, I talked a little bit ago about a piece of legislation that would have required the board to go in and amend the state water plan. This is a concurrent resolution that does a couple of things. Number one, resolves to support the 2014 stipulated mitigation plan between the groundwater users and the Surface Water Coalition and the surface on the ESPA. So resolves to support that plan, and also calls for the board to undertake efforts to revise the state water plan and the camp, again, to increase the board's managed recharge goal from 250,000 acre feet up to 300,000 acre feet, or 350,000 acre feet, excuse me. So that has been adopted by both the Senate and the House and delivered over to the Secretary of State for registration. So Mr. Chairman, that's what I have for legislation. If I could, Mr. Chairman, I think Member Barker asked a question about status of City of Pocatello litigation. I'd be able to provide a brief update with regards to that if the chairman thought it was appropriate for me to two-sentence update.
Okay, let's start. Was there any questions on the legislative update? And then, yeah, I think if we could have a little update on the city of Pocatello, that'd be great.
So the city of Pocatello litigation, it was a request for a hearing that was submitted to the department. The department has identified a hearing officer, and the parties have submitted cross motions for summary judgment related to the matter. And so it's pending before the hearing officer on motions for summary judgment.
Okay, any questions on that? Did that answer your question, Al?
It did. Thank you. Thank you, Garrett.
Yeah.
Who's the hearing officer?
Oh, who's the hearing officer?
Mr. Chairman, Member Gibbs, it's James Suffalo for the Department of Water Resources.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you for keeping an eye on what's going on over at the Capitol.
Sounds good. Thank
Okay.
you very much. You guys have a good rest of your day.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Patton. We're down to item 10, non-action items. Board members, is there anything we need to discuss? It's of a non-action. Okay.
Just like to, while we're still in non-action items, I'd like to have Steve do a quick intro to our field trip. And given that we're actually running ahead of schedule, Steve has actually done a little schedule modification on the fly.
Tour and then come back.
Yeah, we'll do the tour and then come back for lunch, given that the tour location's about 10 minutes away, if that.
I think that's a great idea if that doesn't mess up Jennifer's routine. Okay.
Jennifer, how do I advance?
I have it here.
You have to do it? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Steve Stubner, work on communications for the board and the department, and just wanted to give you a few slides and overview about the Boise City Canal Aging Infrastructure Project. This is kind of more of a urban project than many that the board has funded around the state. Next slide. So just some interesting history with these guys. Their water right dates back to 1866 for 36 CFS. Next slide. And Boise City Canal is a nonprofit canal. They serve 700 small acreage, mostly urban water users in the city of Boise, including me in Northwest Boise. And they also wheel water to many of our parks, Warm Springs Golf Course and Julia Davis Park. Next slide. And they contribute to the Veolia drinking water purification plant near Warm Springs Golf Course. Next slide. So just a few fun facts about Julia Davis Park. So this was the first park designated in the city of Boise, and it was donated by Thomas Davis in the name of his late wife, Julia, who died in 1907. Next slide. And so Thomas Davis was quite the pioneer. He filed the first land claim in the whole territory of Idaho in 1863 for land, 320 acres, that would become the city of Boise. He established Davis Orchard and Julia Davis Park in 1863 by planting 7,000 fruit trees. And he married Julia in 1871. They had 7 children. Next slide. So Mike Harrison, who would have been there at 1 o'clock today, but he's the canal manager, and he notes tens of thousands of Boiseans derive benefit from our canal. We irrigated Tom and Julia Davis's apple orchards, George Collister's Italian plums. Our future depends on a reliable water supply. Next slide. Their diversion is just upstream of Warm Springs Golf Course, and this is called Goodwin Dam. Used to be across from the old Gate City Steel, and the diversion is on the right side of that picture in the trees. Next slide. So there's like 10,000 people that float the Boise River on a hot summer day. daily. And so all those people love going through those diversion drops, which create several whitewater rapids in the city. Next slide. This is a map of their service area from the diversion at Warm Springs Golf Course, and then going into downtown Boise, into the north end, and then into northwest Boise. Next slide. So in 2021 was the real motivator for doing their aging infrastructure project. They had a legal right to divert 24 CFS from the Boise River, but due to a kind of a faulty level of their head gate, they weren't able to divert all the water they were entitled to. And so another factor is when junior water users are curtailed, the level of the Boise River also drops, and they weren't able to get all of their water. Next slide. So their solution was to reduce the floor elevation of their head gate by 16 inches, deepening their canal by 300 along 300 feet by the same amount, 16 inches, to match the head gate elevation, and they put in a new head gate. Next slide. Construction started in January of this winter, and this is when they had all the forms set up to pour the concrete. Randy St. Clair Construction is the contractor. Next slide. And then their new head gate structure has 2 head gates that provide return flow to the Boise River and 2 gates for their canal. Next slide. That's how it looked right after the pour. Next slide. And that's where they're deepening their canal. So total project cost for the aging infrastructure grant. The grant was $122K and the total project cost $366,000. And so Boise City Canal water users will cover the balance. So their former chairman, Alan Winkle, is going to meet us there at 11:30. If we go downstairs and jump in the rigs, we should be there maybe pretty close to that. So any questions?
Okay, any questions? Dean?
Quick, I realize we gotta get that. How many acre feet a year do they divert?
You know, I don't know that answer offhand.
We can find it.
It's probably not a lot. I mean,
30 CFS for the irrigation season.
yeah, well, that could be quite a bit of water, I guess.
8,000-9,000 acre feet, maybe.
Okay. Just curious.
I've got a 2-page profile. I wanted to have copies for you, but we didn't quite get that done this morning. So.
It's okay. All right. Thank you. We'll get ourselves organized here and head to the vehicles, I suppose.
Thank you.
Okay. That being where we are, we had a motion. Pat?
Move for sure.
Okay, second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, one and all. We'll go do our tour and we will be here tomorrow, ready to finish this meeting session.
8 o'clock tomorrow?
Yes.
Will you be doing some press?
Yes,
Yeah.
Val, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning for executive session.
Okay, so just procedurally, I've got to step out of a portion of that executive session. So you can do that first, last? How do you want to handle that piece?
My suggestion would be here at the beginning, so you can be here for roll call. And then I'm going to ask our AGs to touch on the parts that you would be staying here for first.
Okay,
And then,
that works.
yeah, and then I think Jennifer can just park you in the waiting room for a few minutes while we conclude the discussion and then bring you
Okay.
back.
All right, that's great. All right.
Okay, thanks,
See you
Al.
tomorrow.
So does the chairman write the mandate?